Scientists placed a camera inside the coffin of an activist for research purposes, and when they switched it on, what they saw left everyone stunned. Subscribe and drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Corey McAllister was always the voice his community needed, a man who couldn't bear to stay silent in the face of injustice. Most of Riverton's close-knit community was African American, overshadowed by systemic neglect and environmental decline. Corey's father worked tirelessly at the now-shuttered Riverton steel plant, while his mother, a compassionate nurse, often cared for those who couldn't afford hospital bills. The McAllisters weren't wealthy in money, but they were rich in values and unshakable resilience, a legacy Corey carried proudly. The Riverton River, once a symbol of life and harmony, had turned into a representation of despair. Where there had once been crystal-clear waters, now there was murkiness streaked with an oily sheen. Children who once laughed and played in its cool waters were warned to stay far away, as strange illnesses afflicted those who ventured too close. The source of the contamination was no mystery. AquaTech Industries, a massive manufacturing corporation, had been dumping harmful chemicals into the river for years. Though AquaTech claimed compliance with environmental laws, Riverton's residents saw the truth in the water's foul stench, the spike in cancer cases, and the increasing number of children born with respiratory problems. Yet challenging AquaTech was a daunting task. The corporation was powerful, backed by influential lawyers and deeply embedded in the local government. Mayor Thompson, who had once championed Riverton's working-class families, now stood firmly on AquaTech's side. Corey confronted the mayor repeatedly, only to be met with smug dismissals. "You've got no proof, Corey," the mayor would sneer. "AquaTech is an asset to this town. Jobs, economic growth. Don't bite the hand that feeds us." But Corey wasn't one to back down. For him, this wasn't just about saving the river. It was about saving Riverton's very essence. His determination gave rise to the Voice of the River, a grassroots movement that quickly united Riverton's residents. Corey and his volunteers worked tirelessly, going door to door, gathering stories of illness and heartbreak. Social media became their weapon, broadcasting the community's cries for help. Heart-wrenching images of sick children holding signs that read, "We deserve clean water," began circulating online, catching the attention of activists and journalists far beyond Riverton. With the movement's growing success, danger wasn't far behind. Corey always understood the risks of challenging powerful institutions, but he hadn't anticipated how personal the threats would become. It started with anonymous emails, vague yet ominous warnings to stop his crusade. Then came the phone calls, low, chilling voices promising harm if he didn't back off. One morning, Corey awoke to find his car windows shattered, a note taped to the windshield reading, "This is your last warning." Through it all, Corey's sister Mari remained his unwavering support. 5 years younger than Corey, she stood by his side. But no less fiery. As a high school teacher, Mari shared Corey's passion for justice and spent her free time helping to organize protests, even when she wasn't grading papers late into the night. Yet her concern for her brother grew. "You're too important to this community, Corey," she said one evening as they sat together in his small kitchen, the rich aroma of her homemade gumbo filling the air. "I can't lose you. They're not playing games." Corey reached across the table, gripping her hand with steady resolve. "They can't scare me, Mari. They want to silence us because they know we're right. If we give up now, they win, and I won't let that happen." Despite her fears, Mari continued to support her brother. She created striking protest posters, managed their growing social media presence, and coordinated with reporters who were finally beginning to pay attention to Riverton's plight. The pivotal moment came when Corey called for a massive rally right in front of AquaTech's headquarters. It turned out to be the largest protest Riverton had ever witnessed. Hundreds marched through the streets, their voices united in a powerful chant, "Clean water is a right, not a privilege." At the forefront of the crowd stood Corey, gripping a megaphone. His deep voice thundered across the plaza, electrifying the demonstrators. "We will not be ignored," he proclaimed, met with a wave of cheers. "Our children are sick, our elders are dying, all for profit? This ends now." Though the rally remained peaceful, the atmosphere bristled with tension. Police officers lined the streets, their riot gear gleaming under the sun, their expressions unreadable behind tinted helmets. On the steps of City Hall, the mayor stood with AquaTech representatives, their whispered conversations laced with unease as the chants swelled. Then Corey noticed something unusual, a plain black van parked conspicuously close to the crowd. He caught the faint glint of a camera lens in one of its windows. A chill shot through him, but he kept going, refusing to falter. Later that night, as he returned home, Corey felt his stomach drop when he saw his front door slightly ajar. His heart thundered as he stepped cautiously inside, every nerve on edge. The house was eerily quiet, and though everything seemed in place, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. The next morning, Corey confided in Mari. "They're watching me," he said, exhaustion weighing heavy in his voice. "I think they're waiting for the right moment." Mari's face darkened with concern. "Maybe we should stop, just for a little while," she suggested. "Lay low until things settle down." But Corey shook his head firmly. "If we stop now, they win. We're so close, Mari. They're scared, and that's why they're fighting back harder." Mari didn't press the issue, though her worry lingered. Over the next few days, Corey poured his energy into preparing for the next phase of the movement, unaware that his battle was about to take a sinister turn. On the morning of the protest, an unsettling calm hung over Rivautan. Corey stood in his kitchen, coffee in hand, staring at the river outside his window. The water, once a symbol of life, now seemed like a silent witness to the destruction AquaTech had wrought. Clenching his fist, Corey felt the weight of what lay ahead. This wasn't just another rally, it was a demand for justice. Mari joined him shortly after, her face tight with focus. She'd spent the night ironing out last-minute logistics and coordinating with volunteers. Her phone buzzed endlessly with updates. "They're saying there might be counter-protesters," she said, scrolling quickly through her messages. "Some of AquaTech's workers are being bussed in to disrupt us." "Let them come," Corey replied, his voice calm yet unyielding. But their responses were frustratingly vague. "We're monitoring the situation," one officer said, avoiding her piercing glare. Mari wasn't buying it. She knew something wasn't right. Fueled by a mix of fear and determination, she started rallying the crowd. "They've taken him," she shouted, her voice shaking but strong. "Corey was just doing what's right, and now they've taken him. Are we going to let them silence us?" The crowd roared back, their energy revitalized. Mari quickly began organizing people into action. She sent a group to follow the van's likely route, instructed others to spread the word online, and contacted every journalist she could think of. If AquaTech thought they could make Corey disappear quietly, they were wrong. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, Corey was working on a plan. His wrists throbbed where the zip ties dug into his skin, but his resolve stayed firm. He scanned the room, looking for anything that could be used as a tool or weapon. He noticed a rusty nail sticking out of a nearby wooden beam, just within reach if he leaned far enough. Slowly, methodically, he maneuvered his chair closer, his heart pounding with every creak of the floorboards. The nail scraped against the plastic ties, and after what felt like an eternity, the zip ties snapped. Corey rubbed his sore wrists, adrenaline surging through him. He crouched low, listening for any sounds outside the room. Hearing nothing but the faint drip of water, he moved toward the door. It was locked. Of course, it was locked. But Corey wasn't giving up. He found a metal pipe on the ground, likely discarded from the building's past life, and used it to pry the lock. It took all his strength, but eventually the door gave way with a groan. He peeked out into the hallway, which was dimly lit and eerily silent. Back at the protest, Murray was making progress. One of the groups she'd sent out returned with information. "We saw the van head toward the old industrial district," a young man said, out of breath. "It didn't come back out." Murray wasted no time. She gathered a small group of trusted allies and headed to the industrial district, leaving the rest of the protesters to continue rallying. As they approached the warehouse, she spotted the van parked outside. Her stomach twisted, but she pressed on. Inside, Corey navigated the labyrinth of the warehouse, his ears straining for any sign of his captors. He finally spotted an exit, but as he approached, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning quickly, he saw one of the men from earlier. "Going somewhere," the man sneered, pulling a baton from his belt. Corey didn't hesitate. He raised the metal pipe, his grip firm. "I'm done playing your games," he said, his voice steady. The two clashed, the sound of metal striking metal echoing through the empty space. Corey's years of determination and grit served him well. He managed to disarm the man and knock him unconscious. Just as Corey reached the exit, the door burst open to reveal Murray and her group. Relief flooded his face as they rushed to him. "We need to go," Murray said urgently. "Now." The group hurried out, piling into their vehicles and heading back toward the center of town. By the time they returned to the protest, the story of Corey's abduction and escape was already spreading like wildfire. The crowd erupted into cheers when they saw him, their resolve stronger than ever. Corey climbed back onto the makeshift stage, bruised but unbroken. "They tried to silence us," he said, his voice hoarse but defiant. "But we're still here. And we're not going anywhere." The crowd's cheers echoed through the streets, a testament to their unwavering determination. AquaTech had tried to break Corey's spirit, but they had only made him and his movement stronger. But Murray's urgency and raw emotion got her attention. "Please," Murray pleaded over the phone, her voice trembling. "If there's even a chance you can help us prove what happened to my brother, I need to take it." Dr. Harper hesitated before agreeing to meet. "Come to my office tomorrow," she said. "I'll see what I can do." The following day, Murray arrived at the university with Deshawn. Dr. Harper, a no-nonsense woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, greeted them. She listened intently as Murray explained Corey's disappearance and her suspicions about AquaTech's involvement. "We're not asking for much," Murray said, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. "Just your expertise. If we can recover his body, if it's even out there, we need to know what happened to him." Dr. Harper leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. "This is highly irregular," she admitted. "But forensic science is about uncovering truths, no matter how uncomfortable. If you can bring me evidence, any physical trace, we might be able to connect the dots." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Murray left the meeting feeling a mix of hope and dread. Finding Corey, alive or otherwise, was now their singular focus. Over the next few days, Murray and Deshawn mobilized their network. They combed through Corey's known haunts, followed up on leads about AquaTech's facilities, and even organized search parties in the areas surrounding the industrial district. Their persistence paid off when a breakthrough came in the form of a tip from a sympathetic AquaTech employee. The man, who refused to give his name, claimed he'd overheard discussions about disposing of the activist at a remote construction site outside of town. Murray wasted no time. She, Deshawn, and a small group of trusted allies drove to the location under the cover of darkness. The site was eerily quiet, heavy machinery casting long shadows under the dim light of a single security lamp. They split up, searching for any signs of recent activity. It was Deschamps who stumbled upon a shallow, freshly dug area near the edge of the site. "Murray," he called, his voice urgent but hushed. Murray ran to his side, her heart pounding. Together, they began digging with their hands until they uncovered a tarp. With a deep breath, they pulled it back, and found Corey, unconscious but alive. "Corey!" Murray cried, shaking him gently. His face was bruised, and his breathing was shallow, but he stirred at her touch. "We've got you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The group worked quickly, carrying Corey to their vehicle and rushing him to safety. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Corey had been drugged and left for dead. As he regained consciousness, his first words were, "Did they stop the protest?" Murray laughed through her tears, gripping his hand. "No, Corey. They didn't stop anything. If anything, it's bigger now." Word of Corey's survival spread like wildfire. The story of his abduction and near-death galvanized the movement, drawing attention from national media and forcing AquaTech into the spotlight. With Dr. Harper's forensic expertise and the evidence they'd gathered from the construction site, Murray and her allies built a compelling case against AquaTech. The public outcry was deafening, and the company faced investigations, lawsuits, and an unprecedented loss of trust. Corey, though battered, returned to the front lines, his resolve stronger than ever. Standing before another massive crowd, he addressed the people who had risked everything to bring him back. "They tried to bury me," he said, his voice steady and filled with fire. "But they didn't realize I'm a seed. Together, we've proven that no amount of power or money can silence the truth. And we're just getting started." The crowd erupted in cheers, their unity unshakable. Murray, standing in the front row, felt a surge of pride. They had faced the worst, and won, but stepped aside, allowing the team to proceed. The backhoe roared to life, digging carefully but swiftly through the fresh soil. Murray stood at the edge of the grave, her fists clenched, willing the process to go faster. Every second felt like an eternity. Dr. Harper stayed by her side, her presence steady and reassuring. "We'll get him out," she said firmly. Murray nodded, but her chest felt tight with fear. What if they were too late? Finally, the coffin was uncovered. The paramedics moved into position as Dr. Harper directed the team to carefully lift the lid. Murray held her breath, her heart hammering in her chest. As the coffin opened, the air was heavy with tension. Inside, Corey lay still, pale but unmistakably alive. His chest rose and fell faintly, his breath shallow but steady. Murray let out a choked sob, her knees nearly giving way. "Corey!" she cried, reaching for him, but the paramedics gently guided her back. "Let us check him first," one of them said. They worked quickly, checking his pulse, administering oxygen, and carefully lifting him onto a stretcher. Dr. Harper leaned over, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "He's incredibly dehydrated, but he's alive. We need to get him to the hospital immediately." As the paramedics wheeled Corey toward the waiting ambulance, Murray followed, refusing to let him out of her sight. She climbed into the ambulance with him, gripping his hand tightly. His eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, and his lips parted as if to speak. "Murray," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm here," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now. We're going to get you help." The ride to the hospital was a blur. Doctors and nurses sprang into action the moment they arrived, whisking Corey away for treatment. Murray sat in the waiting room, her head in her hands, as the events of the past few days finally caught up with her. Dr. Harper joined her after a while, sitting down with a weary sigh. "He's incredibly lucky," she said. "It's a miracle he survived this long. We'll need to run tests, but for now, the most important thing is that he's stable." Mari nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Dr. Harper gave a small smile. "You did this, Mari. You never gave up on him. That kind of determination is rare." Word of Corey's survival spread quickly, sending shock waves through the community. The media picked up the story, and protests against AquaTech grew even larger. The company, already under scrutiny for its practices, now faced a public relations nightmare as allegations of their involvement in Corey's disappearance gained traction. A few days later, Corey regained full consciousness. Though weak, his spirit remained unbroken. Mari sat by his bedside, holding his hand as he recounted what little he could remember. "They drugged me," he said, his voice hoarse. "I heard them talking about making an example out of me. They didn't think anyone would find me." Mari's jaw tightened. "They underestimated us," she said fiercely. With Corey's testimony and the evidence gathered by Dr. Harper and the team, the case against AquaTech gained momentum. Investigations were launched, and key executives were subpoenaed. The company's grip on the community began to crumble. Corey, once recovered, returned to his work with renewed vigor. Standing before a massive crowd at a rally, he addressed the people who had fought so hard for his life. "They tried to bury me," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. "But they couldn't silence the truth. We are stronger than their greed, louder than their lies, and together we will build a future they can't destroy." The crowd erupted in cheers, their unity and determination shining brighter than ever. Mari, standing in the front row, felt a surge of pride. They had fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious. Corey was living proof that hope, no matter how faint, could never be extinguished. "Mari!" Her eyes snapped open, and she leaned forward, gripping his hand tightly. "Corey! Oh my God, you're awake!" He blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused but filled with recognition. "What happened? Where am I?" Tears streamed down Mari's face as she tried to steady her voice. "You're in the hospital. You were buried, Corey. We thought we lost you, but you're alive. You're safe now." Corey's brow furrowed as fragments of memory seemed to surface. "I remember them talking. They said no one would ever find me." Mari's stomach churned. "Who, Corey? Who did this to you?" But his eyes fluttered closed again, too weak to continue. Mari squeezed his hand. "It's okay. Don't push yourself. We'll figure it out together." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Corey remained under close observation, slowly regaining his strength. Word of his survival spread like wildfire, igniting public outrage. Mari worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Harper and the local authorities, piecing together the events that led to Corey's burial. Evidence mounted against AquaTech, the corporation Corey had been investigating before his disappearance. Whistleblowers came forward, corroborating his claims of corruption and environmental crimes. The company's once ironclad facade began to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. One afternoon, as Mari sat by Corey's bedside, he finally opened his eyes, clearer and more alert than before. "Mari," he said, his voice stronger, "we can't stop now. They need to pay for what they've done." Mari nodded, her determination mirroring his. "We will, Corey. I promise." With Corey's testimony and the evidence uncovered by Dr. Harper's team, the case against AquaTech reached a boiling point. Protests erupted across the country, demanding justice for Corey and the countless others affected by the corporation's greed. Corey's recovery was slow but steady. When he was finally well enough, he held a press conference, addressing the nation with Maury by his side. "They tried to silence me," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "They thought they could bury the truth. But I'm here to tell you, the truth doesn't stay buried. Together, we can fight back. Together, we can demand accountability and create a future where justice prevails." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy palpable. Maury felt a swell of pride and hope as she looked at her brother. They had been through hell, but they had emerged stronger, united in their fight for justice. AquaTech's executives were soon brought to trial, facing charges that ranged from corruption to attempted murder. The company's downfall served as a stark reminder of the power of resilience and truth. For Maury and Corey, life would never be the same. But as they stood together, side by side, they knew they had won more than just a battle. They had sparked a movement that would continue to fight for justice, no matter the odds. "But it's enough to connect the dots," Carla replied, her voice firm as she examined the business card. "This could blow the whole thing wide open." Deshawn snapped photos of the evidence, while Maury's stomach churned with a mix of rage and relief. Every clue they uncovered brought them closer to the truth, but also closer to the chilling realization of how deliberate and calculated this attack had been. As they left the warehouse, Maury turned to Deshawn. "We're not letting them get away with this." Deshawn nodded, his jaw set. "No way. They wanted to bury Corey and his message. Instead, we're going to make sure the whole world hears it." Back at the hospital, Corey was sitting upright in bed when they returned, his color slowly improving. Maury sat beside him, holding his hand as Carla laid out their findings. "This business card and the van's connection to AquaTech security firm are solid leads," Carla said. "But we'll need more to tie this directly to their top executives." Corey's eyes narrowed. "They didn't just try to silence me. They sent a message to everyone fighting against them. We can't let fear win." Maury placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we won't. You've already survived the worst they could do. Now it's their turn to face justice." Over the following days, the team worked tirelessly. Deshawn dug through financial records, uncovering payments from AquaTech to the private security firm. Carla published a scathing exposé, detailing Corey's survival story and the mounting evidence against the corporation. The public backlash was immediate, with protests erupting nationwide. One evening, as Corey rested, Maury sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. News headlines flashed across the screen. "Environmental activist survives murder attempt." "AquaTech under fire for alleged attack." "Protests demand corporate accountability." "You're making waves," Maury said softly, glancing at Corey. He smiled faintly. "Not me." Finally, the day came when law enforcement raided AquaTech's headquarters. Armed with the evidence uncovered by Maury, Corey, and their team, federal agents arrested several executives on charges ranging from conspiracy to attempted murder. Standing outside the courthouse after the arrests, Corey addressed a crowd of supporters and reporters. His voice, though still hoarse, carried strength and conviction. "They thought they could bury the truth," he said, his gaze sweeping over the sea of faces. "But the truth has a way of rising to the surface. This fight isn't just about me. It's about all of us standing together against greed and corruption. And we won't back down." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the city. Maury stood beside Corey, pride swelling in her chest. They had faced unimaginable darkness, but together they had brought the truth to light. As they walked away from the courthouse, Corey turned to Maury, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We've won this battle, but the fight's not over." Maury smiled, her resolve unwavering. "No, it's not. But we'll face whatever comes next, together, and suppress dissent." Among the emails was one chilling message, unmistakably clear in its intent. Ensure he's silenced, permanently if necessary. The email was signed by a high-ranking AquaTech executive, a name Corey and his team instantly recognized. Maury's hands trembled as she read the email aloud. This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This proves everything." Corey sat back, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "We have to go public with this. The world needs to know." Deshawn nodded, his eyes sharp with determination. "We'll make sure this doesn't get buried like everything else they've tried to hide." Carla wasted no time. With her network of media contacts, she arranged for the documents to be released in a carefully coordinated effort. The story broke the following morning, splashed across every major news outlet. The leaked emails became the smoking gun that connected AquaTech directly to the plot against Corey and the broader efforts to stifle dissent. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. Politicians, activists, and even former AquaTech employees came forward to condemn the company. The protests, which had already gained national traction, exploded into a full-blown movement. Crowds filled city squares across the country, demanding not only justice for Corey but sweeping reforms to corporate accountability. AquaTech's executives scrambled to contain the fallout, but the evidence was undeniable. The authorities, under immense public pressure, launched a criminal investigation. Arrest warrants were issued for several key figures, including the executive who had signed off on the order to silence Corey. For Corey, the fight was far from over, but the tide had turned. He stood before a crowd of thousands at a rally in Riverton, his voice strong despite the scars of his ordeal. "This victory isn't just mine," he said, his words echoing through the streets. "It's ours. For every family that's suffered, for every voice that's been silenced, and for every community that's been poisoned by greed, we're taking back our power." Maury stood beside him, pride swelling in her chest. She had watched Corey endure unimaginable pain and rise stronger each time. Together, they had turned tragedy into a movement that couldn't be ignored. As the investigation into AquaTech unfolded, sweeping changes began to take shape. Environmental regulations were tightened, corporate transparency became a rallying cry, and communities like Riverton found renewed hope. Corey's fight had ignited a fire that burned brighter than anyone could have imagined. Late one evening, as the noise of the day settled into quiet, Corey and Maury sat on the porch of their family home. The sky was a deep, endless expanse of stars, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt light. "You did it," Maury said softly, her voice filled with both awe and affection. "We did it," Corey corrected, a small smile tugging at his lips. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "But it's not over. There's still so much to do." Maury nodded, her determination mirroring his. "Then we'll keep fighting. Together." As the world around them slowly began to change, Corey and Maury knew one thing for certain. Their story was far from finished. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where justice, hope, and resilience would guide their every step forward. This moment brought the danger into sharp focus, but it also solidified their determination. Corey straightened, his resolve unshaken. "Nathan," he said firmly, "we're not going to let them silence you. You've already shown incredible courage, and now we'll make sure they can't touch you." Nathan's eyes darted between Corey and Maury, searching for reassurance. Maury stepped in, her voice calm yet filled with conviction. "We'll get you protection. We're working with legal teams and journalists who won't let this slide. The more they threaten, the more proof we have of their guilt." Nathan nodded hesitantly, clutching his coat as though bracing himself for what was to come. "If you think it'll help, I'll stay and see this through. But they're ruthless. Be careful." As Nathan left under the watchful eyes of Carla's contacts in investigative journalism, Corey and Murray returned to their plans, knowing the risks were escalating. They weren't just fighting a corporation. They were challenging a system designed to crush dissent. The next day, the protests in Riverton reached their peak. Thousands of people flooded the streets, holding signs that read, "No justice, no peace, and profit isn't worth lives." The media presence was overwhelming, and drones hovered above the city square, capturing footage of the demonstrations. Corey took the stage to address the crowd. His voice, hoarse but powerful, carried through the air. "AquaTech wants us to be afraid," he began. "They want us to believe that standing up for what's right will cost us too much. But I'm here to tell you that we are stronger together. They can't silence all of us." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a thunderous echo of solidarity. Murray watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. She could see the fear lingering in Corey's eyes, but it was drowned out by his determination. Meanwhile, Carla worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating with journalists and ensuring that every threat, every piece of intimidation from AquaTech, was exposed. The CEO's smear campaign began to backfire as whistleblowers like Nathan stepped forward to corroborate Corey's story. Their accounts painted a chilling picture of a corporation willing to go to any lengths to maintain its stranglehold on Riverton. As the investigation into AquaTech gained momentum, the pressure became unbearable for its executives. Leaked memos and internal communications continued to surface, revealing systematic corruption and a blatant disregard for human life. The once powerful corporation now appeared as a crumbling giant, struggling to maintain its balance under the weight of public scrutiny. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Arrest warrants were issued for several top executives, including Robert Kane. The footage of the CEO being led away in handcuffs was broadcast nationwide, a striking image of accountability in action. Riverton erupted in celebration. Strangers embraced in the streets, and chants of "Justice for Corey" rang out. For the first time in years, there was a palpable sense of hope. Corey and Murray stood together on the porch of their modest home, watching the celebrations unfold. "We did it," Murray said softly, her voice tinged with relief and exhaustion. "They're finally going to pay." Corey nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "This isn't just about me," he replied. "This is about everyone who's suffered because of them, and it's about making sure nothing like this ever happens again." As Riverton began to heal, Corey, Murray, and their team turned their attention to broader goals, pushing for stricter environmental regulations, ensuring clean water access for every community, and supporting whistleblower protections. Their fight had ignited a movement, and they were determined to see it through. Though the road ahead was still long, they had proven one thing beyond a doubt. Even in the face of insurmountable odds, truth and resilience could prevail. But there was no turning back now. "We'll find a way to keep you safe," Corey said with a firm tone, his resolve unwavering. "And we'll make sure they're held accountable for everything they've done." The next morning, Corey and Murray met with Carla and Deshawn to discuss their next steps. The attacks on Nathan were a clear indication that AquaTech was feeling the heat, but it also meant the stakes were escalating. "We need to take this to the next level," Carla said, her voice urgent. "National media, congressional hearings, whatever it takes to keep this story alive." Corey nodded with determination. "We've come too far to stop now. This isn't just about Riverton. It's about holding corporations accountable everywhere." The group quickly started strategizing for a nationwide campaign, reaching out to allies from coast to coast. They understood the challenges ahead, but they were emboldened by the truth that was on their side. The more AquaTech tried to bury the story, the more they were bringing the fight into the light. That evening, as Corey stood before a crowd of thousands, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This fight wasn't just about him or his town anymore. It was about justice for everyone who had been oppressed or ignored. And he wouldn't rest until they won. The trial was finally here. Corey stood in the front of the courtroom, his hands firmly gripping the wooden railing. The room was packed with reporters, activists, and Riverton residents. Across from him sat Robert Kane, AquaTech's embattled CEO, flanked by a team of high-powered attorneys. Kane's calm demeanor was a thin veil over the pressure mounting against him. Corey took a deep breath, preparing for the moment he had fought for, the moment Riverton had fought for. His testimony could tip the scales in favor of justice, securing a victory for the community and bringing AquaTech's actions to light. "Mr. McAllister," the prosecutor said, gesturing toward Corey, "can you describe the events leading up to your abduction?" Corey nodded, his voice steady despite the nerves stirring inside him. "I was leading a peaceful protest against AquaTech's pollution of our river. We had gathered to demand accountability, to give a voice to the people who had suffered in silence for so long. That's when I noticed the black van." He recounted every detail, his abduction, the threats, and the men's cold indifference to his life. The courtroom fell silent as Corey described the beating he endured, the feeling of being thrown into the river, left for dead. "They didn't care if I lived or died," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "All they cared about was protecting their profits. But I survived, and I'm here today to make sure no one else has to go through what I did." The prosecutor nodded, clearly moved. "Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Your courage is an inspiration to us all." As Corey stepped down from the stand, the courtroom erupted in applause. The judge quickly called for order, but the energy in the room was undeniable. The tide had turned. The trial stretched on for weeks, with AquaTech's lawyers throwing everything they could to dismiss the charges. They claimed the leaked emails were taken out of context, that the security firm acted independently, and that Corey's allegations were exaggerated. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The financial records, the testimonies of whistleblowers like Nathan, and the damning footage. AquaTech's guilt was undeniable. When the verdict was finally read, Corey felt a wave of relief wash over him. The jury found AquaTech guilty on multiple counts, including gross negligence, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The company was hit with massive fines, and several executives, including Robert Kane, faced criminal charges. Riverton erupted in celebration. People flooded the streets, cheering and hugging each other. The river, once a symbol of despair, now felt like a beacon of hope. In the months that followed, Corey and Murray worked tirelessly to rebuild their community. The settlement funds from AquaTech were used to clean up the river, repair infrastructure, and provide health care for those affected by the pollution. Schools were renovated, new parks were built, and the town began to heal. But Corey's fight didn't end there. Inspired by the movement they had created, he and Murray founded the Living Justice Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to environmental justice and corporate accountability. The foundation quickly gained national recognition, partnering with communities facing similar struggles. "This isn't just about Riverton," Corey said during the foundation's launch. "It's about standing up for what's right, no matter where you are. It's about holding those in power accountable and making sure every voice is heard." One sunny afternoon, Corey and Murray stood on the bank of the river, watching children splash in the water and families enjoying picnics. The air was filled with laughter and the sound of flowing water, a stark contrast to the silence and despair of just a year ago. "We did it," Murray said, her voice full of pride. Corey smiled, his eyes reflecting the sunlight off the water. "We did it. Together." As he looked around, Corey felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. The scars from his ordeal would always remain, but they were a reminder of how far they had come. Riverton was no longer a forgotten town on the brink of collapse. It was a community reborn. For the first time in months, Corey allowed himself to dream about the future. There was still much work to be done, but he knew they were on the right path. And as he stood by the river, once filled with pain, he felt hope rising, like the water's gentle current, carrying them toward a brighter tomorrow. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes. Share this video with your friends to discuss important topics together, and check out our other videos for more inspiring stories. Thank you for being with us.